Hello, everybody. This is Rachel Treese on Flex in the City, and this is our first episode for 2021. So I think 2020 was a very, very challenging year for lots of us and also for financial services leaders. But there were two key positives of 2020, and that was agility in the face of ambiguity and the power of teamwork. And so when at the end of 2020, I was recording a session for Neil Slater, who is the global head of real estate and deputy head of private markets for Standard Life Aberdeen. And we had some challenges with Wi-Fi, which was one of the things that also happened in 2020. I was delighted that David Micallef, who is the chairman of FTS Global, was able to step in and record this session. So please enjoy this session with Neil Slater, who did a fantastic interview with David. And we look forward to seeing you all for the future episodes of Flex in the City in 2021.
Today in Flex in the City, we interview Neil Slater, Global Head of Real Estate and Deputy Head of Private Markets Standard Life Aberdeen. From superior individual contributor, transforming to be a great leader of people. The growth, the learning, the next generation. It's all about people. All that happening right now in Flex and the City.
Hello, everybody. This is Dave Micallef for Flex in the City. And today I've got Neil Slater. Neil, hi, how are you today?
Hi, Dave. Very well, thanks. Pleasure to be here today.
Great. For those of you that don't know Neil is the Global Head of Real Estate and Deputy Head of Private Markets. So quite a lot on your plate at the moment, I would have thought.
It's been a fairly busy year, Dave, that's for sure.
No, I can imagine. Great. So as always, it's normally my colleague Rachel that does these interviews, but I'm standing in for her today. We'd like to know a lot about you, Neil, if that's all right. So who is Neil Slater? Perhaps you could start by just telling us a little bit about who you are and your background and how did you end up in asset management?
Yeah, sure, Dave. Well, actually, I started life as a lawyer originally, a finance lawyer. So I left university in St Andrews and trained as a lawyer in London. And after a few years, got a little bit bored, I guess, of drafting documents late at night. And started to take an interest in some of the asset management clients. Put myself through an MBA when I was working and ended up working for Man Group out in Switzerland, which was really my first move into asset management. And from there, I got a lot of experience on the alternative side across debt, hedge funds and real estate. And lo and behold, I'm still in the asset management industry quite a few years later.
Right, very good. I mean, obviously, asset management, a bit like financial services, which is my own background, you get to see some quite interesting characters, some colourful, some inspiring, not so inspiring. I'm just curious, along your journey, who's been perhaps an inspiring leader for you and why?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. I've been really lucky. I mean, I've worked in different places, London, Zurich, Tokyo, and there's probably been three really important people to me in those locations who I had a real connection with, people who managed and led me at that time, who gave me opportunity, who took the time to give me feedback and took the time to really help me on my career. Right. And, they're not famous people, but they were people that meant a lot to me. And the reason that I mention them is because, when I look back and I think about my career, they're people that I look up to. They're people that I think were fun to work with, but they acted with integrity. They put their teams and represented their teams kind of first and foremost, and that meant a lot to me.
Oh, interesting. So as you're talking, I'm getting a strong sense that your values are starting to come out a little bit. Integrity, a bit of fun, connection, authentic. Would I be on the mark with that?
You would. I mean, of course, yeah. I'm a serious Scotsman, but. No, absolutely. Those are really important to me, actually. And I think that integrity point, I mean, it's easy to talk about. It can mean a lot of different things, the word integrity. But that is important to me. And it's important that when I've seen that in people I've worked for as well.
Very good. So if integrity and connection and authenticity are strong values, what motivates you, Neil? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, there's a couple of things. First and foremost, it's definitely working with great people, working in a team and working with not only great people, but smart, intellectually interesting people in an intellectually interesting industry. So first and foremost, that's one of the key things. I think the second thing from my side, apart from just the people and the broader industry, is the global connectivity that exists within financial services. So, I'm sitting here today in Edinburgh. I'm talking to you in Barcelona. You're in Barcelona. I was on a call on Friday with someone in Tokyo, and our industry is cross-border. It's international in nature, and that is just fascinating.
And obviously, you mentioned before that you travelled a lot, right? So you spent time in Switzerland and Tokyo, I'm led to believe, and you said it earlier on. That interconnectivity possibly wasn't there as much when you were there, but what was it like? Was the global frame the same then as it was today? Obviously, technology's moved on.
Yeah, I mean, technology's changed a lot. I'd say a couple of things. When I was in London, fantastic city, multicultural city. I was working with people from different jurisdictions, and it was the same in Zurich. I was in a very obviously Germanic part of Switzerland, bearing in mind it's Zurich, but working in a team of people from all over Europe, from South Africa, from Australia, from the US, from Asia. And that in itself was really interesting. I'd say Japan actually was perhaps the environment I was in was very broad in terms of cultural aspects and different people from different countries. But it was also you were one of the few people who were not Japanese. And that was different from working in a London, perhaps, or a Zurich. And that in itself was quite interesting. And as you said, the role in technology now compared to when I started in the industry also makes those connections easier, not only to have, but easier to sustain once you leave Japan or once you leave Switzerland, etc., through calls such as this.
Very good. So adaptability has got to be also one of your strong features, right? Because I can imagine, you literally went from one opposite to the other, a very direct style, to a country where you need to read the air sometimes to actually understand what's going on. So fair play to you there. Yeah, very good. I understand you've got a couple of kids, almost teenagers, if I'm right. Do they know what you do for a living? Do they understand what asset management is and financial services?
So, children are fascinating, as you know. They're inspiring. My kids are 10 and 12, and they're not at that age where they're beginning to ask more questions about, what I do and, what does it mean? And, let's take just real estate as an example. What does it mean that you buy buildings and perhaps people, have businesses in those buildings and they pay rent? What does it mean when you're talking about interest rates or you're talking about time value of money? So they're getting a bit more of a sense of what I do, and I'm spending more time now than certainly ever before answering questions about why did I do this, or does that mean that you were presenting on this today, Daddy? And that's fascinating. What I would say, actually, what I find really interesting is not just them asking me questions, but it's getting an insight into how they interact as 10 and 12-year-olds with their friends, how they use their phones, how they think about life, what's important to them. Because to me, that sets the future trend of where financial services will have to follow in due course. So it's a kind of, even at 10 and 12, it's a kind of two-way street, which is interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. They're giving you a glimpse of the future clients of asset management, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
also potentially talent that will end up working in asset management as well.
Yes.
Yeah, very interesting. I understand that in your career evolution, you started as a technician. Perhaps you can tell us about that in a second. And ultimately, you've now found yourself in a leadership role. Listeners would be very interested, I think, to hear about your journey. How did you move from technician to man manager stroke leader of people? And more importantly, what do you think makes a great leader?
Yeah, so let me talk about the journey, first of all, because it's something that I've reflected on a lot. And I remember very clearly at the time in going through that change from a technical, let's say specialist, technical expert to more of a leader. Actually, it was quite stressful.
Okay.
And, I was someone who was all about knowing exactly what I was doing. I knew my stuff. I delivered. I more than delivered. At times excelled, and that was your mark of excellence, because you were the go-to person. And then you had these opportunities to step up a little bit. Maybe you'd find yourself managing some technical experts. And then ultimately what happened with me is that the business gave me an opportunity to move to Japan, to move to Tokyo. And they said, look, things are going great on the technical side, but we think you could expand your horizons and learn some new skill sets and continue this journey. And I found myself being thrown into essentially the deep end, starting a business from scratch, having to recruit people, having to think about everything from, eventually, HR to finance to marketing to sales. And I realized through that process that leadership has a huge value, is hugely valuable. And until you make that leap, you think to yourself, well, I mean, what would I do every day? What would I be doing with all my time? And do I just need to be talking to people all the time because I've got things to do and things to deliver and things to learn?
Yeah.
But yeah, you go through this journey and you start to really understand the true value of leadership. And you asked at the beginning about what I think is important. And I think a couple of things. I think being a great listener is really important. So having and learning the patience to listen if you don't have that. And I was never a patient person earlier in my career. I think having that capacity to, I talked about integrity and honesty, but having the capacity to use that listening and use that understanding of all the signals you're picking up to then direct and think about future strategy and turn it into action and turn it into inspiration and possibility for others is one of the key skills of a leader. So that's kind of listening. I suppose I would empathy with maybe the link there, and the last thing that passion and that energy is about, I think, about being futuristic and about utilizing all of that opportunity you have as a leader to culminate in being passionate and being futuristic and inspiring people to actually take a business forward. And that's been the most enjoyable part for me, has been that I've been really surprised by how much I've taken out from leading people, working with people, listening to people, as opposed to delivering on the technical side. And it's amazed me in this journey.
I love your use of words like passion and futuristic and just engaging. I can feel the energy when you're speaking there. And I think what you're telling people, correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you're a technician, it's all about you. And you hold yourself to high standards, and you push yourself technically to be the best, and as you say, the go-to person. And then at a certain point in your career, when you do make these sort of changes to man manager, you realize actually it's not about you anymore. It's about how you nurture the people around you and the team around you and develop them and grow them. And in reality, that's where you can actually get the most personal benefit back, ironically, from going through that exercise. So I think that's interesting for people to just reflect on as well. Great, thank you. You've talked about your own skills and what you think is important. Financial services still has a mixed perception in the world, right? Some people still think it's great, particularly those that understand it, but your general public still see it as the bad guy, and you would argue that a lot of new talent may be going elsewhere, not necessarily entering the sector. What do you think financial services and financial services leaders could do right now to try and make financial services more attractive, to attract young talent, to retain some of the talent that might be thinking of moving off into other sectors which may not be as tarnished reputation-wise?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, because I think it's one of the biggest challenges that we face in financial services is how do we attract, retain, and sustain great talent? And I see a lot of younger people who come into the industry that do a couple of years and then decide it's just not for them. They decide to do something else, or to your point, those that just are not interested in the first place. And I think for me, one of the things that we have to do as an industry is get back to basics, and we need to educate people, and we need to talk with pride around what we do for society, the role that financial services can play to help people's savings, to help pensions, to facilitate the financing of infrastructure, to ensure good and sensible capital flows globally. And in doing that, we can do that in a way that also impacts the environment. We can do it in a way that invests by doing the right thing for society. So I think we've got a wonderful opportunity to, if you like, tell a much better story, a story with clarity, with conviction around what we can offer as an industry. I think one of the things that, as a personal view, one of the things that I think is helping with that is the shift I've seen since I came into the industry around diversity and inclusion, around a much more openness within the industry, is giving us an opportunity to say that financial services isn't what it was 20 years ago, where you come in and maybe you left your jacket on the back of your seat because you didn't want your boss to know that you'd gone home a bit earlier. It's a different ballgame now. But the one thing we need to do, again, I think, is to educate the world around what we do and what we can achieve as an industry and the impact we make. And I don't think we do enough of that.
Yes, this is coming back to passion and purpose again, really, isn't it? Making sure that the wider audience understand just how important financial services to the whole ecosystem, right? I mean, as you rightly identify, it's everything. It's pensions, it's savings. It's essentially facilitating everybody's lives at the fundamentals of it all, right? Where they live and what money they have to pay for their weddings or their car or their first house or their kids' education, whatever it is, so to make them sustainable, make their lives sustainable.
Absolutely. And the other thing I'd add, I mean, just going back to children for a minute, I'm amazed. If I think to when I was 10 or 12, I did not have the knowledge that my children have now about environmental impact on things, around the choices they have.
Yeah.
And I think as an industry, we would do well to remember that those people who are already quite knowledgeable on these things at that age, in 10 years' time, will be coming into the marketplace and they'll be working out, do I go and work in tech? Do I go and work in medical? Do I go and work for the government? Do I go and do financial services? How can we persuade people who have a much greater understanding of the impact on some of the decisions that we make as an industry? How can we persuade them to come in and, as I say, not just attract them, not just retain them, but also sustain them within the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned looking back at younger people. Imagine looking back at Neil Slater when he was in his mid-20s, right? What would you say to him today about building his career? What advice would you give a 20-something-year-old Neil Slater?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think what I would say is, I'd say a couple of things. First and foremost, absolutely go for it. Don't worry about making the wrong move. Don't worry about saying the wrong thing or asking the wrong question. Just go for it. Ask as many questions as you can. Take as many learning opportunities as you possibly can. And if you feel at any point a lack of confidence about things, don't worry about it. That will come. If I think back to when I was younger, I certainly was much less confident in front of more senior people. Maybe I was keen to learn, keen to get on, but it wasn't, always clear to me exactly the pathway I was going to take. But going back to what I was saying earlier, I think with hard work, with a desire to learn, a questioning nature, and then just go for it 110 miles an hour, and you've got absolutely nothing to worry about. The great thing about our industry is that it's global in nature. For people who are curious, for people who are open-minded with a global mindset, who are interested in different cultures, interested in different landscapes, interested in different outcomes, this industry has got a heck of a lot to offer. And so my advice is just go for it.
Yeah, very good. I mean, you certainly inspire me when you talk. I can feel the passion. So yeah. you mentioned Zurich and Japan, and we talked very briefly about the different approaches needed, and being adaptable is probably an understatement. What traits do you think really helped you to be successful in such unusual environments? What helped you to achieve success in those places?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. In fact, really interesting because they were both at different times in my career. So when I went to Zurich, I was much younger. I just got engaged, and I probably believed I was completely invincible. And I was in an environment with a lot of other young professionals, similar background, similar age, and I think, as I mentioned, from different kind of Western countries. What was interesting about that was I was at that age where I just kind of went for it, but it was fascinating for me to distinguish, even within Western countries, the real cultural differences, let's say, between American, British, direct Germanic versus slightly more reserved British, et cetera, et cetera. But in that part, for me, it was about just throwing myself into it, learning as much as possible and enjoying the experience. I made some great friends and colleagues out of it, and had some wonderful bosses. Japan was really different because I was at a different stage of my career. I went out there to build a business from scratch. At the end of it, we had a business of about 50 odd people. I was only one of two non-Japanese in the business.
Right.
And I had to probably be a lot more humble and a lot more recognition that I did not understand the culture, that I needed to really listen, that I couldn't read the signs in meeting rooms. I got a bit better after 4.5 years, but it's very complex. And so it's a great learning experience to learn that, you don't know everything. And you need to learn to rely on other people. You need to really be much more culturally sensitive than you've ever had to be before. And so it was a much more challenging experience in a way, very tiring experience at times. But a phenomenal learning experience, just around people, around cultures, around how people approach different, how do you think about things in different ways. Just phenomenal.
We know from some of the more progressive leaders that they're actually encouraging their senior management to shift, and I think you've touched on it, from know it all to learn it all. And I think that's really what you've just summarized is you've got to be ready to be humble and to learn from those around you, even if they're much more junior than you. So I think that's an important takeaway.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. It's one of the key takeaways for me on that journey. And the other thing I'll add is I talked earlier about a younger me and advice I would give to people. And I was definitely thrown into circumstances in Japan where, if you told me 10 years ago I would be speaking in front of 500 people at a embassy event, I would have thought no chance. I can't do that. Or you'd be, meeting a senior dignitary in a government residence with people from financial services, etc., to represent financial services. That type of thing, that confidence building journey was also part of that journey. So learning that you don't know everything at all, and you're always learning. But also giving you the confidence to recognize that that you can do this. You can lead and you can move forward.
Yeah, explore the unknowns. You've certainly got courage, Neil. I give you that. To go and try some of these things. They could have gone horribly wrong, right? But sometimes you just have to do it, don't you? And just trust in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. We talked a lot about you in the work environment. What do you do outside of work, Neil? I'm curious. What do you love? What passions do you have outside of financial services?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Look, from my side, I'm a very simple guy. I'm a creature of habit. I'm a runner. I love to keep myself fit. That's really important to me mentally as well. So I do a lot of running. But on the flip side of that, I love my food and I love my wine.
Right.
So I tend to cook and drink wine to relax, and I run to keep myself in shape so I can do the former. So those are my main passions.
Very good, very excellent. So if you like, I'll pick up on wine and food because obviously I love that myself, right? Having lived in Luxembourg and France and now spend a lot of time in Spain. Who would be your favorite chef or sommelier or what's your favorite wine, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I don't so much have a favorite chef because I mean, I just love, particularly living in Japan and Zurich, as you'll appreciate, with Luxembourg, a lot of Michelin star restaurants. I've been very lucky to try different types of food. But one person that stuck out for me was a chef called Yannick Eleno, who at the time we went to a lovely restaurant at Le Maurice in Paris where I got engaged. That's why it was very memorable. Okay. And he became a very famous chef, and, it was fantastic. And wines, I have a passion actually for aged Rieslings and aged Champagne. Are the two things. I love all types of wine from all types of regions.
Right.
But those are the two things I quite like to get my hands on if I can.
So Riesling and Champagne. Why those in particular? I'm a bit surprised because most people would say a great Bordeaux or a really good Burgundy wine, for example. What makes you say Riesling, for example? It's somewhat understated, right?
It is absolutely, and it's one of these grapes that can really, it's one of these grapes that can age for many years in the bottle. It can go really silent and quiet for a couple of years, and then it can really come alive. And then you open it up, and it's just a really beautiful, long wine at the end of it. It can be. I mean, and when we lived in Zurich, we used to visit Alsace, and I've been to Australia and had some down there as well. As you say, it's very understated. It can be, beautiful and gorgeous wine, but a lot of people don't think of it, particularly the aged stuff.
Right. So just hold that theme. What could financial services learn from a great bottle of Riesling, do you think?
So I think, what have I said about Riesling? It's it can last many years. It can, go through periods of sleepiness and extreme excitement, but through the thick and thin of just lying there for decades, it delivers. And I think actually what financial services can learn is that you don't have to be a famous Bordeaux, you don't have to be a Petrus or a Mutter and Rothschild all the time. Actually, you can be a Riesling that, let's say, perhaps, under promises and over delivers. And I think that's probably a good message for financial services. Brilliant.
Very good. So, Neil, listen, I thank you ever so much for bearing with me. And I found it fascinating. Certainly I'm inspired. And I think I'm probably going to go off and try a Riesling myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
You just listened to Flex in the City. Catch us on our next episode.